All right. So once again, welcome everyone. Very cool to see an international community. And it seems from the Zoom chat that a lot of people either play instruments or have played the musical instruments or have any experiences with sports, which is very relevant for today's topic, which is on deliberate practice for Team CBT. And I know that most people here have some familiarity with Team CBT, maybe not, that would be fine as well. Some of you might have experience or knowledge about deliberate practice. If not, fine as well. All are welcome. So today's webinar, this is part of a larger webinar series that's hosted by the Sentio Counseling Center. The Sentio Counseling Center is a counseling center out of California that provides low-fee online therapy. And this is for individuals, adolescents, and couples in California. If you're interested or know any people who might be interested in having online therapy in California, feel free to go through the website at sentiocc.org. And the reason why also Sentio is relevant is that the way we practice psychotherapy and the way we train therapists is deliberate practice informed. Basically, we're always trying to perfect our own skills, track our clinical outcomes, and get better over time, which is a lot of work, but it's very exciting as well. I want to make a single slide for the main distinction of why today's webinar, I think, is relevant. And the single slide, and I'm sure it's not going to come as a huge surprise, is that there's a huge body of knowledge letting us know that conceptual learning is very different from procedural learning. Conceptual learning meaning you learning something through reading, through lectures, through any sort of passive means where you're thinking or reflecting about the teaching materials. For example, right now, I'm talking about a certain subject, and hopefully you might be learning something from me and Mike and Maurer about this subject. That would be conceptual learning. You're learning about concept, you're thinking about it, you're debating about them, etc. Now, that is very different from procedural learning, which could be, in a more straightforward way, be called learning by doing. For most people in most trainings, in most therapy models, overwhelmingly, you'll spend most time in conceptual learning. However, we know that for us as clinicians to consolidate skills, to actually get better over time and be able to do different things in front of the same clinical challenges, we actually need the two. We need the conceptual learning and we need the procedural learning. We can't just read books. We need to actually role play repeatedly skills in the face of challenging stimulus and get feedback on our performance and get better over time. So we're part of this huge revolution in the field, and by we, it's an extended we. It's the team at Sentio, it's Mike and Maurer, it's different people working on deliberate practice in conjunction with their own therapy models who want to also increase the amount of skill building along with traditional conceptual training. All right, that was my deliberate practice rant of why this is relevant. And so as part of this ongoing small revolution we're doing, we've been putting out a lot of books, working with different people from different therapy models. These are only some book covers from our American Psychological Association series, where we've been developing skill building exercises for different therapy models. And I am very, very happy to say that most recently, Mike and Maurer have agreed to do one such books to be published by Springer for Team CBT. Meaning very soon there will be structured, systematic, comprehensive skill building exercises for you to get better specifically at Team CBT skills. So now you can learn the theory, but also get the procedural learning done. So let me present our two very special guest experts for today. With us, we have Maurer Katz, who is the director and founder of the Feeling Good Institute. And he has trained thousands of therapists in this model of Team CBT. And he has collaborated very closely with Dr. David Burns, who is the founder of Team CBT. And also Mike Christensen, who is, I believe, the clinical director at the Feeling Good Institute and also a very accomplished clinician and trainer in his own right. So these are two wonderful people who I've had the good fortune of collaborating with for this upcoming book. And I want to pass the ball to them without first putting this up on the screen. So this is the table of contents for the skills that will be addressed in this upcoming deliberate practice for Team CBT book. Each of these is one skill that Mike and Maurer have painstakingly had to describe and create skill building exercises so that people can repeatedly practice and get better at each of these skills. So now I'll shut up and I'll throw the ball to Mike and Maurer. Hi, Mike. Hi, Maurer.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. Wonderful.
I'll throw it to you before asking specifically about specific skills. Wanted to get your take of why deliberate practice is relevant for Team CBT specifically, and then just the process of taking the first steps in thinking about creating exercises and writing this book.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure working with you, Alex and Mike. It's been really wonderful, and it's kind of exciting that we're in these final stages of buttoning up this book and getting it ready to be published. I think, the one thing to say about the exercises in this book, Mike and I were thinking about them, is that I think something that makes Team CBT special is that a lot of other therapies are oftentimes, or what we train in other kinds of therapies is what I would call a reactive process. So the patient says something, and the therapist is trained to figure out what to say in response. And that results oftentimes in a therapy process that is a little bit meandering. What really is exciting about Team CBT in my mind is that it offers a clear roadmap for therapists to lead the patient through a process of recovery and overcoming their symptoms. And this is done in a very client-centered way, but still the therapist has a roadmap and how to do that. And then when we were kind of thinking about what to do, what exercises to put in the book, we were wanting to have that roadmap be kind of immediately clear just by following the exercises in the book and having kind of stopped at key skills that therapists need to have in order to shepherd the client in an effective way through it towards recovery.
One of the other aspects I think that really stood out for me, Alex, when you approached us to write this is it brought me back to my very first team training opportunity, which was a workshop in really the Feeling Good Institute. One of our philosophies is, how can we get better as therapists? How can we help other people become better therapists? That's our kind of our mission and our passion. And I'll never forget the first time I did a workshop with Dr. Burns, and he taught us something. He said, now we're going to go and get in groups of 2 or 3 and practice. And I'd always been taught that I was very caring and good at connecting with people, and realized very quickly that, oh, I'm actually not that skilled in certain areas. And so when Alex approached us with the deliberate practice kind of focus, it just aligned completely with what we were already doing at Team CBT, with how we were learning the skills and practicing them, and it just took it to another level, enhanced it, focused it. And so for me, it just was building on what we've already been doing and taking it to the next level.
Yeah. That's the very interesting thing about Team CBT is you already do have, which is kind of distinctive, I would say, of the model. You already do have this tradition of role-playing and practice in the training, which is wonderful. Now you're kind of systematizing it a little bit with these exercises. You want to speak a little bit to the role of how it's a different kind of effort and very humbling in a way, maybe anxiety or shame-inducing, the procedural learning, the skill building learning versus just talking about it. What's the difference for you?
Well, I think you've hit on some of the key emotions there right off the top, right? There's that anxiety provoking whenever we get asked in front of a group of people or even one-on-one to demonstrate our skill. It's like, ooh, now there's a bit of a spotlight on me. Can I actually do these things that I've read about that I totally agree with and think they're wonderful, but can I actually do them? It's much like your, instrument experience. I play the guitar, and a friend of mine I would call him a musician rather than a guitar player. And it's one thing to, strum a guitar, but it's another thing to become a musician where the music just sings. And I think this is where, when you learn an instrument, you practice over and over again with some simple things. You break it down to just playing scales, right, on the piano or on the guitar. And when you're an athlete, as a hockey player, you stand and just take the shot. You just shoot the same shot over and over again, right? Or if you're a football or soccer player, you make that same pass back and forth hundreds and hundreds of times until it becomes second nature. And you have to overcome that initial kind of anxiety of, I'm going to mess this up, and be okay with that, because that's one of the things that really is part of Team CBT as well. We call it joyous failure. And always moving towards something that's a little bit more challenging than you've done before, right? One thing to, pass back and forth the ball or the puck, but now do it while running, or now do it while skating. That's another skill level. So there's this constant pull away from practice, right?
Yeah.
We love to theorize. It makes us feel like we're educated and smart, and it's almost addictive in nature, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, anything you want to add to that more?
I'm just remembering this, like kind of one of the first times that I was training in Team CBT. We had it was a group of newbies over at Stanford, and I was training for the first time, and David Burns came to kind of to help out and support the training. And I was talking about the 5 secrets of effective communication and how to give, better empathy. And a person said, like, wait, but can you give, how can you do like, I feel statements? Isn't this too revealing? Isn't this, I don't feel comfortable with it. And I said to her, no, you really should do this. You should see this. And then David turned to me and he said, what of the 5 secrets of effective communication are you practicing right now, Maor? I was like, yes. It was a total failure, and it was so wonderful that he said that. It was super humbling in front of like these 35 people that I was supposed to be training. I was failing so miserably, and then it taught me, and it continued to teach me with this kind of approach of failing as fast as we can, kind of way.
Yeah. So a question for you too, that maybe you've come across in your own trainings. Some people are, for valid reasons, sometimes wary of doing skills training or repetitive rehearsal because they might be afraid that it will turn them into therapy robots, quote unquote. That this idea of repetition might actually deter from the spontaneity of good, fluid therapy work. Want to get your take on that. How would you respond to that kind of fear that a lot of people validly have without having done the work?
Well, I think it's a completely realistic and wise fear to have. In fact, as you said that, I was reminded when I was learning the 5 secrets, the empathy and connection tools, I'd become fairly skilled. I was beginning to teach and was doing a demo. And after I did the demo with this gentleman, we got a grade, right? That's how we got feedback, an A, a B, a C, or D, A being the top mark. And I thought I, technically nailed it. A+, I was waiting for my A+, right? Feeling so good about myself. I'd mastered these 5 secrets. And he said, well, I think that was about a C or maybe a C+. And I was kind of shocked and at the same time looking forward to his feedback. And I said, well, what was it that I missed? And he said, well, you sounded a bit like David. It was a bit formulaic. It was a bit robotic. And this is the importance of doing it over and over again, because sometimes we actually start with doing it a little bit robotic until it becomes more comfortable and more confident. And then we infuse our own style. And he was really saying to me, you need to bring your heart to it. It's not enough to just mimic David, because you're not David, Dr. Burns. And then when I brought my heart to it, it was almost instantly an A+. And so I would say, oh, that's fantastic if you're having that experience, because it means you're on the right track. You're heading down the right road. And for some, doing it in that formulaic way initially can get us to the point at which it becomes more natural and fluid, and more connecting, more deeply powerful.
Yeah, you know, this thing that what you're mentioning, Alex, is this kind of discomfort with doing the deliberate practice exercises is exactly what we're up against. This is what we're trying to overcome in order to help people go from go towards more procedural learning. And one analogy or metaphor that I like is to think about like the tools that we're teaching as kind of tools of the trade, thinking of therapists. We're kind of like carpenters, and we're getting this new box of tools. Like there's a new saw, and there's a new screwdriver or something like that. And when we're starting with them, we're kind of clumsy with them. They don't feel like we really, you know, they really belong to us. They're uncomfortable to us. But then practice with them, use those tools, get better at them, and they become our own. And they can have our favorite screwdriver and our favorite saw, and our technique is down, and they feel like, okay, they're under our tool belt and they're kind of ours. It takes a lot of practice and willingness to try and take some leaps.
I love that analogy. That's great. So I'll take your lead then. Speaking of tools, let me share my screen here again, and maybe we can talk specifically about the 15 tools that you developed exercises for. You know, run us a little bit through your process of choosing these specific 15 skills that you focused on?
Yeah, so these 15 skills they basically take you from through a process of therapy, kind of really thinking about Team CBT as a very process-friendly, process-oriented therapy. And so if you're running through it in a typical therapy session, we start every session with testing, gathering data, and then we continue with connection and empathy. And while we continue with empathy, it's not just a phase, we do it throughout, but it's really the building block, or really the foundation of what we do. And then we continue with the agenda setting exercise, which is bringing up resistance to conscious awareness, melting it away. And it's a step-by-step process. It's Team CBT is different that way, where it's really kind of procedural. We go step by step. And so the next steps, kind of as we go through from 1 to 15, basically go from the beginning of a session all the way through to assigning homework and moving on in anticipation to the next session.
Mike, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it was a wonderful process to go through, even for our own learning, and just enhanced, I think, my own skill. And one of the challenges that we faced as we were trying to decide on which particular skills to include is, boy, I think we could probably write 4 or 5 volumes. Even when you look at methods, you can see, we've got a couple of chapters on the methods, but I think David has 150 methods or something that he looks to, and so you could do a book.
That's for the next book, Mike, the handbook.
Yeah,
of methods.
and so what we tried to do was capture the heart of each method. What is the key component in that method that really brings it to life? And so you won't necessarily see kind of all of the method there, but what are the unique aspects of each of these skills that really is the heart of it? And I think we've done a reasonable job of that. I'm sure we've made some errors, and we'll learn from it. But that really helped guide, even when we were diving into each chapter. Okay, what is it? And there's a number of revisions. It was fascinating when we first started to think, oh, this is what it is. And then actually, as we worked through it, went, actually, I think we're heading in this direction. And that was very powerful for my own learning, as well as putting the book together and having others that have been testing it out for us.
Yeah, one very interesting thing that I've found through working with different people from different therapy models is that doing skill building exercises such as this really forces you to get concrete also on the theory, interestingly enough, of the skill. right? So there's a kind of a refinement of how to practice and even what you're practicing exactly, having it to nail it down to a concrete behavioral level, right? So I think that's the perfect segue to give people a taste of the kind of work that you have been doing. We're going to be focusing on just one skill so people can get a sense for what is a deliberate practice exercise and what it is in the context of Team CBT. And you guys should suggest that we focus on exercise number 4, which is the first step of agenda setting, invitation. You want to set this up for us a little bit, what that is, very briefly?
How'd you do that, Mike?
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, so the invitation of course, is the step that we use when we're shifting from our empathy and connecting phase into our active work phase. And we are making the assumption here that you've done really wonderful, beautiful connecting. You've got a strong therapeutic alliance with your client or your patient, and we want to give them the idea that therapy isn't just kind of talking and listening, but there's some active component of work. But we also want the client and the patient to be in charge of the direction we're going. So when we offer an invitation, we let them decide which direction we're going to go. So it's an opportunity for them to help us to set the direction, but also giving them the, giving them the idea that it's more, there's more to therapy than just talking and listening.
Great. So let's see how that plays out in an actual skill building exercise. So I know you, Mike and Mara, know, I'll just say it for the benefit of everyone else. In a typical deliberate practice exercise, there is a major component that's a big part of the work, and that requires usually a lot of repetitions and discussion and experimentation. And that's developing the skill criteria, which are these 3 numbered colored statements here. And these are the therapist's verbal or nonverbal behaviors that define the skill that you're practicing. Often in psychotherapy training, we focus on broad terms like the therapeutic alliance. It can even be like cognitive restructuring, wherever it is. And we stay there. We stay at that level of jargon, right? And the beauty of doing a skill building exercise is that you actually have to go from the level of jargon into the level of observable behaviors. So in this case, for the invitation exercise, you've distilled what a good invitation is, into 3 skill criteria. First, the therapist provides a brief summary or empathy of the client's problems. Second, the therapist explicitly invites the client to get to work on the problem of the client's choice. Third, the therapist provides the option of continuing talking, also called open hands. So the way this works is we have a number of client statements. You can call it stimuli, prompts. And after the client stops talking and reads this scripted statement, the therapist has to improvise a response that tries to meet all 3 of these criteria. Correct me if I'm wrong, in most cases, it doesn't have to be in this exact order, although in some cases that might be true. But in this case, for the most part, you can fulfill them in any order as long as you fulfill all 3 criteria in your response. And by the way, parentheses, you'll notice that sometimes you might have a lot of an easy time fulfilling one of these criteria. Maybe you're really good at providing a brief summary, the first criterion, but then as you actually try to do criteria 2 and 3, you kind of stumble your way through it. That's where repetition and refinement comes in. So let me read you one example, and we'll actually then move into practicing so that we practice what we preach. So as an example, let's imagine that the client statement is this first one here, where the client says, I'm struggling today. I feel very down and depressed. I write out to-do lists, but never get around to them. My dad is pressuring me all the time, and I'm super stressed about paying off my car loan. Therapist responds, you mentioned problems with depression, anxiety, procrastination, relationships, and I can see how painful they have been for you. So that's criterion 1. I'm wondering if you'd like some help with any of them today. Criteria 2, explicitly inviting the client to get to work on the problem. Or if you need more time to just talk and have me listen. Criteria 3, providing the option of continuing talking. Again, I want to emphasize, you're only doing a good invitation if you fulfill all 3 criteria. So what I'm going to suggest is that actually I am going to copy and paste into the Zoom chat these 3 criteria that you just saw. And on my end, I have a list of client statements. So if anyone feels courageous and is willing to do some repetition refinement, we have 2 very compassionate experts here who can provide feedback. So this is your opportunity to get some free feedback from Mike and Mauer. And the idea is failure facing, to get it wrong and get it better over time. So thank you. Already have 2 courageous volunteers. If anyone else wants to jump in as well, feel free to do so as we try this out. Thank you, Nandi. Thank you, Anna Teresa. So I'm going to play the client. I'm going to read a client statement, and feel free to take your time, go over the 3 skill criteria again. And when I stop talking, feel free to try a response that meets those 3 criteria.
You want us to go one at a time?
Yes, Nandi, I'll start with you if that's okay. So I'll do
Sure.
one client statement for you, getting some feedback, and then we'll move on to a different person.
And just a quick note, I recommend that everybody else who's not doing the exercise, write down exactly what Anandi is saying. And so this will help you give better feedback.
Thank you, Mauer. Great suggestion. All right, Nandi, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So I've been struggling with feelings of depression and sadness, and I need some help with it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing all this with me. And I understand you've been struggling with feelings of depression and sadness, and my heart really goes out to you. I'm wondering if this is a good time now for us to get down to work on this, or if you'd just like to talk more about this and have me listen, or is there some other problem you'd like to work on today?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nandi. I'll throw it back to our experts.
I think you did a wonderful job, Nandi, and you definitely hit all 3 criteria. One thing that I would say is that I personally would like for you to jump in a little bit sooner. And I not necessarily thank Alex for sharing all of this, but just go with immediately with, I see that I can sense that you're struggling, feeling a lot of depression right now. Is this something you'd like to roll up your sleeves and get to work with? So just jump in right into this beautiful empathy that you had before, rather than thanking him. Want to try it again?
Sure.
All right, let's try it again. So I've been struggling with feelings of depression and sadness and need some help with it.
All right. So I see that you've been struggling with feelings of depression and sadness. And I wonder if you want to get down to work on that now, or maybe you want to tell me more about this, or maybe there's another problem you'd like to work on now.
It's great. I love how, how much shorter this was. And this way it kind of packs a better punch. That was really great.
Thank you for that feedback. Yeah.
Great work, Nani. I felt very good hearing it as a client. Cool. How about we try a different client statement? And Hannah, are you okay with trying one?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
All right, let's try it. So there are 2 things that are bothering me. The first is feeling so depressed, and the second is that it stresses me out that I can't seem to beat it.
Yeah, well, like, so you mentioned a lot of problems, like you told me how depressed you be feeling and how stressed you get because you cannot beat it. And they are all important and they sound so painful problems. And I'm wondering is this now a good time for us to roll our sleeves and work on one of these problems, or do we need more time to just vent and have some more empathy and support, because that is so important also.
Right.
Okay.
Like I'm letting you lead this.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. That was beautifully done. And I particularly liked when you said you mentioned a number of problems and these are important. I liked that you included that component and saying, is this now a good time, or maybe you'd like to kind of, vent and get more support, because that's important too. And you balanced it. So it felt very open hands. The one thing I would like is, can you slow it down and just
I talk so fast.
do you want to, well, let's try that again, because it was the components were so beautiful. Try it one more time and just slow it down a little bit. How's that sound?
Yeah,
Great.
great.
All right, so let's try it again. Yeah, so there are two things bothering me. The first is feeling so depressed, and the second is that it stresses me out that I can't seem to beat it.
Yeah, Alex. Yeah, you've mentioned that you've been really depressed lately, and also that it really stresses you out because you don't seem to beat it, right? And I'm wondering is this now a good time for us to roll our sleeves and work on this one of these problems, because they are so important and they sound really painful? Or do you need some more time just to vent and get more empathy and support, because that is so important also? Okay, I made it the effort to talk slower.
Yeah, there was more heart there. It felt more warm and inviting. I like that. Yeah, how was that for you, Alex, as the patient?
It's good. I'm curious because you focused on let's say a fourth criteria that you added of slowing down. If we're keeping track of that, how did Anna do? Would she need to try again in order to slow down even more? Give her feedback on that specific element.
Yeah. It could be slowed down maybe a little bit more. It was such a big improvement that it felt, certainly each of the components, you hit them all three in the key criteria. And I think that's really important to note. You didn't edit anything out. You captured all of the things that he'd said and then left it very open hands. So you might say, oh, yeah, this is painful. You mentioned these three things. And I'm wondering if now would be a good time to roll up our sleeves and get to work, or perhaps you need a little more time to tell me about what this has been like for you. So when we can do this, you can pause in between. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to highlight something. This is kind of meta commentary. So you just modeled an intervention, Mike. Thank you for that. And if you ever practice again a musical instrument, I can ask you, Hannah, have you ever practiced any instrument or any sport?
Yeah, sport, yes, like tennis.
Tennis, great.
Yeah.
So to get better at is it backhand that's called? Yeah.
Sure.
Well, okay. To get better at shooting whatever, how many times do you have to do it in order to get better?
Oh, hundreds or millions.
All right. So you're getting at a very important principle here, is the principle of good practice. And that's a temptation sometimes, is we don't want to just get through all the client statements, although that's going to be a temptation. Doing a lot of repetitions is what's going to get better, right? And getting more and more nuance with each repetition. So if you're meeting the free skill criteria, there's two options. Either we just move on to a different client statement to make it harder for you, or we get more and more nuance because you're learning with each repetition something new.
Yeah.
Right? So theoretically, we could keep going here for 10 more repetitions, and hopefully that would be helpful. We won't do it just for today, but anyway, thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you so much. It was so helpful, just this small practice. Thank you so much, everybody.
Awesome. We still have time for a small... Oh, sorry, Mike, you're gonna...
This is beautifully done. And you can see like the invitation, it seems so simple, right? We'll just ask them if they want to get to work, and yet those nuances really can add to it. So I just appreciate your work with that, Anna and Carol.
Totally. So we still have time for Deborah. Thank you so much, Deborah, for stepping up. Are you ready for me to try a client statement?
I am. I hope.
All right. Don't worry. We have two very compassionate feedback experts here. All right. So I'm always stressed. No one really understands how hard it is, and everyone just wants to tell me what to do.
Wow, Alex, I hear you saying that you're always so stressed, and everybody keeps wanting to tell you what to do, and it doesn't sound like that's very helpful for you. And I'm wondering whether this would be a good time to start working on one of these issues, or whether there are other things that you would like to talk about, because that can be very important as well.
All right. Thank you, Deborah. Mauer, Mike?
That's wonderful, Deborah. And I kind of have like a hidden agenda. I want everybody here to get a little bit better themselves at kind of giving the feedback based on deliberate practice. So I'm kind of wondering if people who's willing to give Deborah feedback. And let's start with just if you can say which criteria did Deborah hit.
Yeah, Nupur.
Yeah. Hi, Deborah. I think I really love the part where you mentioned you do sound stressed, and it doesn't sound like that's very helpful for you. So I think as the client, I would feel a lot more relatable, because I would feel you're on the same side as me. And I think that was just the part which was the highlight for me. So I picked that up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, Deborah, you hit all three criteria, which was great. And I wonder if anyone can think of something that Deborah, one thing, and the goal is here, and Alex has been really good at teaching Mike and I this. At Team CBT, we're used to giving this lengthy feedback and like, oh, I'd give it like an A, maybe an A minus. Here's what I like. And then you can do this, and this better. Maybe that too. Then maybe that thing as well. And and our therapist practicing is kind of eyes glossed and he's like totally overwhelmed. So if you can think of one thing to say to Deborah, just one thing, and then pass the ball back to her so she can try again really quickly. If we're finding ourselves talking too much, we know that we're not doing our jobs well as practitioners. So someone willing to give Deborah one piece of feedback, and then Deborah, you'll practice again. And I put pretty much verbatim what Deborah said in the chat as well, to help you guys kind of think about something to help Deborah learn.
Hannah, you'd like to share something?
Yeah, I think it was great. Only the thing I hear you saying, I think it's a little bit formulaic. So I don't know if you agree. Maybe not starting that way, but I don't know what to think.
Perfect. Do you want to try again, Deborah, without saying I hear you saying?
Okay.
Great. And I'll add one more thing, and I would acknowledge the client's anger too here.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. So let's try again. So yeah, I'm always stressed. No one really understands how hard it is, and everyone just wants to tell me what to do.
Wow, that sounds difficult, Alex. You're saying that you're always stressed and no one seems to understand you, and people are just trying to tell you what to do. And it doesn't sound like that's very helpful for you. And I can imagine that you are probably feeling at least annoyed and maybe even angry at all these people who are telling you what to do without even understanding what's going on for you.
Great. You want to continue with the rest of the skill criteria?
Yeah. And so I'm wondering whether this would be a good time to start working on this problem, for perhaps the stress, but you can pinpoint it for me. And or maybe you have other things that you just need some more time to talk about and to vent and to share with me. That would also be fine.
Cool.
One thing you'll notice is that in the improvement, we actually touched on the empathy component. And with the progression of the book, those would be the first 4 chapters that you actually worked through, really honing that. So there's a bit of an expectation, and Deborah's obviously very skilled with it. She did it beautifully. But there's an expectation you've actually practiced those things. So we're going to infuse those in, even though it's not on our skill criteria, that it becomes part of that expectation. And I love what you did there, Deborah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to thank the 3 very courageous volunteers, and I want to say you did a wonderful job. Thank you so much for the 3 volunteers. And yeah, don't worry, because if you feel that you're not at the level of our wonderful volunteers and you're starting really from scratch, that is also the point of practicing in the lower practice. So even if you can do 0 of what you just saw, that's a great place to be in, because yeah, we all start there basically. And the skill building exercises are really, imagine you just did a small bit of practice, you just saw a small bit of practice. Now imagine doing 30 minutes of this focusing on the same skill, or on 15 skills, because you'll have 15 team CBT exercises from this book. So that was a great little taste of the process. Let's see. We have a few minutes left, and I guess I would just open it up to questions around the lower practice, this book process, these skills. Yeah, Heather.
So thanks all of you who actually were willing to volunteer. I appreciate that, because I was sitting here not volunteering. So thank you. But my question is, how do we get away from personal preference versus actually doing the skill effectively? For example, I feel like everybody kind of hit the 3 criteria in some way, but there was still feedback like, okay, maybe you could be slower, or maybe you could. So, and I feel like a lot of that is just personal preference. Like, do you like somebody who talks faster or slower? Or do you, so how do we get away from that in the way that we help other people and our feedback to other people, and sort of, I don't know. That's my question.
Great question. I have my own thoughts, but I'd love to hear Mike and Mara before I jump in with an answer.
Brief answer, and then more you can maybe fill in the rest. But I think it's such an important question, because every single client that we work with, every patient we work with, will be different. And the kind of music that they like, if we take our music illustration, will be a different flavor. And so when you're practicing the 5 secrets as an example, what works for one may not work for another. And so this is where we want to practice a number of different styles of music, right? Like some clients I work with, stroking is very, very important. And for others, that will be offensive. And so when we do the practice, if you practice with lots of different practice partners, you'll get that feedback, and then you can adjust your style with it, because there's an art to it as well as a science, and we were kind of distilling it down to the science component. So once you get that skill, now you can bring the art piece to it. More anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that it's a really great question as well. And I think that I think with our 3 demonstrators, we were struggling to find anything to give feedback. And I think they're just very skilled at the invitation step. And so what I would do in real life is I would give that feedback, give my personal take for what it's worth, and then actually move to a more complex, higher level exercise. In whether it's a more complex exercise within the invitation step, kind of we're started at 1 and 2, and we go all the way to 15 typically, and the higher numbers, the more complex we believe the exercises, or we can move to a different kind of subject. So as a trainer, you're kind of noticing that as you're kind of doing these exercises in the book, we try to make them so that you could be both a trainer and a trainee, and do this with another person. And so you're kind of, we want to teach you through this how to kind of go through the process. So yeah, keep the feedback very short, and then you have to kind of keep your fingers on the pulse. You're sensing it's really easy for, you know, the Annas and the Debras and the Nandis of this world. So you move to a more difficult level.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. So this is talking to the principle of the lower practice, which is sticking to your zone of proximal development. So in other words, if something feels too easy and it's not a big challenge to fulfill the 3 criteria, that is a marker to increase the level of challenge in the exercise. And that can be done in 2 ways. You can either, like Mara is saying, move on to a different client statement that might feel harder to respond to, or move on to a different skill altogether if it is easy. And yeah, the way we just last idea, the way which we don't get bogged down in personal preferences is your feedback should be tied as much as possible to those criteria. It's kind of like when you're learning a music piece, there are the right notes and those notes have to be played, but then the way in which you play them might be open to more interpretation, right? So we want to get the notes right. And then there's a level of nuance in the feedback that you might or might not get into. It's kind of a different thing. But we really want to make sure that the criteria are being met. That's the most important piece. Mike, you
Sure. When we were having our intern group at FGI test out each of the chapters, and we'd go back and forth with practice and feedback, sometimes we'd say, try this other flavor of it, right? And see how that lands for you, how that works for you. Because some would say, I don't know that I would use those words. That's not really me. Right. And so I think that's another way of kind of enhancing with that same example. You can try it 2 or 3 different ways in different orders, and see which lands most effectively, or you can go to the more challenging one if it just seems to be rolling off. Yeah. Mark, did that answer your question, Heather? It was such a good one. Yeah, thank you.
Great question. Thank you. Mark, you had a question as well? And Nandi?
Yeah. Yes. I just wanted to know, is there any evidence that those key criteria lead to better outcomes that you added to the invitation? Because obviously the invitation part of it is essential. And I know that empathy and goal consensus are key factors in therapy. Is that what informed adding those 2 components to the invitation? And secondarily, couldn't we create an invitation that involved some other factors of therapy? Just like wondering what informed the particular decision to say, this is how to do an invitation.
Yeah, do you want to answer that one more?
Sure. You know, this is not, this is not in any way an evidence-based decision making. It's really kind of putting our heads together, thinking what seems to be the key factors here that work. We can later, I'd love to have the opportunity. I think we're moving in that direction of being able to test whether we're accurate and refine it ourselves and improve on it. So it is more of like, you know, putting our heads together as more experienced clinicians in Team CBT and thinking, what is the essence that we could impart for others to practice on? And I know that for me, it took me about like 3 years to get to like a very basic level in Team CBT. And what we're seeing now with our ability to kind of put our heads together and figure out how do we train others in it, we're able to get people to a much higher level of skill within a few months than I definitely saw for myself after a few years.
Awesome.
What he's saying is he's jealous of people having this book.
Yeah. Oh, it's so much more efficient. Yeah, certainly some of the components, there is some research like regarding testing itself. Dr. Burns did some research studies, the value, the importance of testing, but in the actually specific components that we've broken down, well, it'd be wonderful to be able to get some of that research. And I know deliberate practice is a very feedback informed, outcomes informed kind of approach. And so it's on the horizon, I would say, and that's why I love that question, because it's man after our hearts as well when you ask that question. It's really when we do the practice, what's the research? Well, we get the feedback right away, right? And so that's the data we're getting, in a one-to-one basis immediately, rather than kind of talking theoretically and then, going off into the sunset to randomly do whatever. So it's a great question.
Thank you.
I just want to say one more thing about that, because if you're interested in doing research, Mark, ping me, please, because I think we're very excited about where we are with the development of Feeling Good Institute and Team CBT, because I think now, for maybe the first time that I can think of, we have a large group of therapists who are all doing therapy in a very process-oriented way with kind of delineated steps of therapy, and we can basically test every one of them. And not only that, but the vast majority of therapy is actually done online, so we can capture it, electronically. And so the implications for research are amazing, and we're definitely moving in that direction.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm sad about, that we're all learning kind of individually in silos, but then, the field as a whole isn't gaining from all this information. So I will ping you.
Yay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm aware of time, but I still want to see if we can sneak in Nandi and Nupur's question.
Quick question. Is the invitation step something that we do at every session when we're working with a client?
Yes, we do it every session. It just looks a little bit differently. So if you've been working with a client for a while and you start seeing them in this new session, so you review, the first step is to review how they're doing. So I see from your mood scores that you're doing so-and-so. Is that about accurate? How did the homework go? And then last few sessions, we've been working on your anxiety problem. Is that something that we should continue to work on, or do you feel like there's something else more burning that you'd like to share with me first? And so this is a kind of a slightly different version of the same invitation that we go to every session. Just a quick word about the kind of the process of therapy in the invitation is that the goal is to go from the generic to a focused problem to work on. And the invitation is that first step towards kind of focusing in, zooming in, knowing that this kind of hourglass metaphor, moving into this one grain of sand that we're going to work on at a time, knowing that it'll also kind of work in the process of induction to the rest of the problems.
Be a great research study. How many therapists actually offer an invitation, and at what point in the therapy do they offer it? At 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 45 minutes? That'd be a great research study.
Yeah, I've started working on a note where in my progress note, I write down the minute of my first invitation, and that to keep me accountable. And I noticed that when I'm like in minute like 13, I'm like, oh, like this took a little while. And sometimes I'm in like minute 43, I'm like, this was not a very effective session. But if I'm in minute 2, 3, 4, I'm like, okay, this is moving along. So the idea is to keep people accountable through structure.
Nupur, is it a brief question? I want to respect everyone's time.
I'm hoping so. Just a minute, if you'd allow me.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So my question is more from a personal perspective. So I've just started out with Team CBT, and I keep going back to the 5 secrets, where there is also a lot of it done on practice calls and self-work. But when you get out of that study mode and say when you're at home, sometimes you don't feel like actually using 5 secrets, or maybe you want to switch from that therapist mode to maybe a normal human, right? So how do you manage that? Because I've also heard a lot that you can only excel if you actually do a lot of self-work, because that is how you actually impact yourself and maybe those around you. So I'm a bit stuck somewhere. How do you actually practice that being in your normal life out of the study schedule?
Well, in my training course, when we're doing the 5 secrets practice, I instruct people for homework. Do this with your clients, but particularly do it with the people who are closest to you, because those are the ones that it's most challenging. Do it with your spouse or your partner or your child or your sibling, right? Do the disarming. Agree with everything your partner says for 1 week and see what happens. And then it becomes integrated into your lifestyle, and there's times when I don't want to use the 5 secrets and I just choose not to. And I'm okay with that.
And then usually doesn't go very well.
It doesn't usually go very well. But it actually becomes almost kind of a natural part of how you interact. And so it becomes more, it's like playing an instrument, right? And when you sit down, it becomes natural. So thank you for that question. Yeah.
Thank you for answering. Thank you so much.
Don't change your personas. Have your same, be yourself while you're doing the 5 secrets.
Yeah.
In person, in therapy, at the store, everywhere.
One last thing, Alex, when you introduced Mo and I as experts, I cringed a little bit because I think this is the one thing I've learned the most in this process is that we never stop learning and growing. Like, I don't consider myself an expert. I feel like I have a lot more work to do now, having, been a co-author with this book. So if you feel like you've got a long way to go, then you're on the right track.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. I know that I'm aware of time, but I want to thank very especially Mike and Mauer for being the wonderful people they are, the wonderful book they have written, and also being here with us today. Thank you, everyone, for being here today as well. Thank you for all the volunteers that very courageously stood up and did a wonderful demonstration of a small Delaware practice. Now you can imagine what a longer Delaware practice would be like. The book, we're about to finish it around next month. Hopefully later next year, we'll have it out. Yeah, and I'm sure that Mike and Mara are open to get emails. I myself am open to getting emails if you have additional questions or things that are still burning. And yeah, if you'd like to learn more about our sponsor, the Sentio Counseling Center, again, this clinic that uses also Delaware practice and outcome monitoring, feel free to come to our website at sentiocc.org. And we have a lot of other webinars there, Delaware practice webinars. So if you want to learn more about Delaware practice, you can join us there as well.